Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today into a case that is, it's really more than just a true crime story. It's a fundamental turning point for justice.
It absolutely is.
We're talking about the capture of Joseph James D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer.
And the paradox here is just chilling.
Right. I mean, this guy, a former California police officer, successfully lives this devastating double life for decades.
And the numbers are staggering. We're talking at least 13 murders, over 51 rapes, more than 120 burglaries, all between 1974 and 1986.
So our mission today is really focused on the end of the story, the resolution. We're looking at the huge legal hurdles the prosecution had to clear to get a conviction in 2020.
Through that unprecedented plea deal.
Exactly. And maybe more importantly, the revolutionary forensic technique that finally pulled him out of the shadows. That, of course, being investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG.
And you said shadows, and that's the key. This wasn't just a cold case, it was frozen solid. You have a criminal campaign that was just sprawling geographically and over time.
It went on for over a decade.
A dozen years
Yeah.
across multiple counties. So the solution, it couldn't just be police work. It demanded this incredible legal strategy and a brand new scientific innovation because, the traditional methods had failed for 40 years.
To really get the scope of the problem they faced, you have to look at how he operated. He wasn't one criminal in people's minds. He was 3 or 4, depending on where you lived. He starts in Tulare County in 1974. There, he's known as the Visalia ransacker.
And that phase was, well, it was crucial because he was the cop in Visalia then.
Right. And that job ended in 75 after he was caught shoplifting, of all things.
It's amazing. But that knowledge he had even early on, it gave him such an edge. He knew patrol routes. He knew police procedures. He knew the limits of forensics back then.
Exactly. Then he makes this dramatic shift. He becomes the East Area Rapist, the EAR, in the Sacramento and Bay Area from 76 to 79.
And this is where the sheer volume of his crimes just explodes.
At least 51 sexual assaults. And the murders start, like the 1978 killing of Brian and Katie Mezgior.
And then finally, from 79 to 86, he escalates again. He becomes the original Night Stalker, the ONS, down in Southern California.
Santa Barbara, Ventura, Orange County.
Yeah, and the violence is just, it's off the charts.
Yeah.
But the method is also more refined. You see it in the 1980 murder of Patrice and Keith Harrington.
So, okay. You have this meticulous, calculating predator spanning 11 California counties, using his insider knowledge as a cop to stay hidden for 4 decades.
Absolute ghost.
So when they finally arrest him in 2018, the prosecution they have a logistical nightmare on their hands.
They absolutely did. I mean, think about it. How do you prosecute one person for crimes in 6 different jurisdictions? The evidence, the witnesses, it demanded this massive consolidated effort.
And the result of that effort was the plea deal in June 2020. D'Angelo, who's 74 by then, pleads guilty to 13 murders, 13 kidnapping charges.
And in exchange, he avoids the death penalty.
Right. He gets 11 consecutive life sentences. But the sources, they really emphasize that avoiding the death penalty, that wasn't the whole story. There was a kind of legal genius to this deal.
If you connect it to the bigger picture, the plea deal wasn't just about avoiding a trial. It was. It was necessary because of the law itself.
You mean the statute of limitations?
Precisely. For most of the sexual assaults and burglaries from the 70s and 80s, the clock had run out decades ago. Legally, prosecutors couldn't charge him with most of his crimes.
Wait, so the plea deal was the only way to get any kind of legal accountability for those victims?
That's it exactly. To get that closure for all the survivors, the deal included a judicial admission to 161 uncharged crimes.
161. Wow.
Without that deal, those crimes were basically invisible to the court. So the prosecutors, they leveraged the murder convictions to force him to confess to everything, to make sure every single victim's story was validated in court.
That is an almost unbearable pressure point for the victims, though. You get justice, but you have to accept that he gets to live.
And that tension was just. It was palpable at the sentencing in August 2020. They had to hold it in a university ballroom to fit everyone because of the pandemic.
4 days of victim impact statement.
4 days. And it was just this stark contrast to D'Angelo's own, bizarre and hollow display of remorse.
Let's talk about that, because after his arrest, he had that cryptic confession, blaming it on an inner personality he called Jerry.
Yes. He was reportedly mumbling to himself, I did all that, and then he says, he made me, I pushed Jerry out and had a happy life. Just this bizarre attempt to push the blame onto someone else.
Which must have just been infuriating for the
It
victims.
really deepened the sense of depravity, you know.
And then, at the sentencing, he breaks years of silence in the courtroom to say he was truly sorry.
An apology that just vanished in the face of the survivor's trauma. Dolly Crease, the mother of a victim who died of cancer years later, she held up a photo of her daughter and made him look at it.
And Chris Pedretti, who was attacked when she was 15.
She described how her small, predictable, and safe world was just shattered. I mean, the Judge Michael Bowman, he was clearly unmoved. He sentenced D'Angelo to die in prison with no mercy and said he possessed all qualities you clearly lack.
The legal closure was there, but the pain, obviously not forgotten.
Not at all.
So it seems like the legal strategy had kind of run its course, and the real solution, the capture, came from somewhere else entirely, pure forensic science.
Right, because it wasn't a lack of evidence that kept this case cold. It was that the existing databases they couldn't make the connection.
For decades, nothing. No match in the national database, CODIS. And then, bam, 2018, the case breaks wide open using investigative genetic genealogy, IgG.
And it all hinged on one crucial piece of evidence.
A DNA sample from the 1980 double murder of Lyman and Charlene Smith.
That's the one. An assistant medical examiner, Klaus Spieth, was so meticulous he collected an extra kit. And that sample sat in a freezer for 37 years.
37 years. But even with that perfect sample, CODIS was a dead end. Why? I mean, why didn't a clean sample from a serial killer get an instant match?
It really comes down to chemistry and design. The traditional CODIS database uses something called short tandem repeats, or STRs.
Okay.
Think of an STR as a forensic fingerprint. It's highly specific. If you have a suspect's STR profile and it matches the crime scene, it's an exact match, perfect for confirming who someone is. But it's almost useless for finding distant relatives.
So if the killer wasn't already in the system, which D'Angelo wasn't...
The system hits a brick wall.
Yeah.
Exactly. IgG, though, uses a totally different marker. It uses something called SNPS, single nucleotide polymorphisms.
And that's what the commercial genealogy sites use.
Right. They use millions of SNPs. They aren't designed for exact matches. They're designed to find family similarities, third cousins, fourth cousins, even further out. It allowed investigators to look outward from the DNA instead of just inward at a list of known criminals.
So here's where it gets really interesting. They have the SNP profile from that 1980 sample. What's the first step?
First step, they uploaded to a public genealogy website, GED Match.
Which, at the time, was more open to law enforcement than, say, 23andMe.
Much more. And that search, it yielded matches to distant relatives, including a probable fourth cousin.
A fourth cousin. I mean, that's like finding a needle in 1,000 haystacks. How do you get from a fourth cousin to one specific man?
That's where the genealogist Barbara Ray-Venter came in. The team built about 25 complex family trees. Then they started applying filters.
Like demographic data.
Exactly. Age, they knew the suspect was likely in his 70s. Geography, he operated in specific counties. Sex, and they systematically whittled down this one tree about 1,000 people until only one name was left.
Joseph James D'Angelo.
And once they had him, they just needed that final, direct, legal sample for confirmation.
The indisputable match.
Yes. So investigators put him under surveillance, and they surreptitiously collected his discarded DNA, specifically a swab from his car door handle and a tissue from his curbside trash.
And that was it. That was the direct match they needed for the arrest.
That was it.
And we really can't overstate the impact of this one case. The sources say this technique has since been used to solve over 93 murders and rapes nationwide.
That success, though, it immediately raised a really important, a really necessary question about genetic privacy.
Because the whole thing relied on his innocent relatives voluntarily uploading their DNA.
Entirely. You have a right to privacy, but your third cousin's choice to find their family tree can suddenly expose your genome to a cold case investigation. It's this issue people call networked privacy.
So wait, the big ethical concern here isn't about his privacy.
Yeah, not at all. He waived that when he left his DNA at a crime scene.
It's about his innocent family members.
That's the core tension. They're sharing their DNA to find relatives, not to solve homicides. So it creates this ethical dilemma that legal scholars are trying to solve using the principle of proportionality.
Basically balancing individual privacy against public safety.
Right. And what's interesting is what the public thinks about this.
Well, sources say there's pretty strong support, right?
Strong support, but with very specific limits. You see about 79 to 80% support for using IgG, but only for major violent crimes, homicide and rape.
That support plummets for something like property crime.
Exactly. It makes sense. You want murderers off the street, but you probably don't want your cousin's DNA used to track down a 40-year-old petty theft.
Yeah, that feels like a line.
It is. And it shows where the safeguards have to be. The process has to be strictly vetted, strictly limited to major crimes to respect that networked privacy.
So what does this all mean then? I mean, the Golden State Killer case, it delivered this profound, delayed justice for victims and families.
Without a doubt. The plea deal forced him to admit to everything, giving legal closure to survivors who the law had basically forgotten.
But that justice hinged entirely on this new technology that, it fundamentally challenges how we think about genetic privacy.
And that's the key takeaway for you, the listener. The D'Angelo case proved IgG is a transformative tool, but its success forced a critical conversation on all of us. We are, right now, trying to define the line where the huge benefit of solving these awful cases outweighs an individual's right to control their own genetic data.
A final thought for you to consider. D'Angelo, a former cop who used his insider knowledge to evade capture for 4 decades, he wasn't brought down by traditional police work. He was brought down by a decision made by a distant relative to join a genealogy database. So what are the long-term ramifications for your own family's genetic privacy if you or a relative decide to click upload?